This video aims to explain our study regarding the following question: Mac or PC? Which computer is used the most by HEC students? This statistical study is a cross-sectional observational study concerning the population of students at HEC Montréal, even though the BBA program isn't completely representative of the entire HEC population. We chose to study a sample from the BBA program since we didn't have the resources to take into account master students, for example. To collect the data, we proceeded to cluster sampling since the population of interest was already presented in different units, which are the different groups of each BBA level. We selected 4 groups at random, one from each level for a diversified sample. Although we are aware that the right way of proceeding to a cluster sampling method would have been randomly selecting individuals from each available cluster. To minimize bias, we didn't count the same cluster twice. We collected the data during the class break to reduce absences, as many students arrive late and tend to leave class early, and we didn't consider people who used tablets or who took notes by hand. Finally, we counted the classes on different days to reflect the reality to the best of our capacities. Our study is based on observational data collection, which means we did not need to be concerned of the ethics protocol implicated in a survey, so our study respects ethical constraints. Now, for the variables. The indicator variable of interest is denoted by X and takes the binary form: 1 if the individuals own a Mac, and 0 if the individual owns a PC. The sample size chosen was 188 individuals. To provide greater confidence in our results, we chose the 90% confidence level. In addition, we set the Emax at 6% to gain precision and to account for a certain margin of error due to student absences or other estimation errors tied with the sample. Now, looking at the bar graph, we can see that Macs are on average more used than PC among each cluster of our sample. The proportions vary between 42% to 58%, which suggests that the proportions are quite stable. Overall, we found that Mac users represent 55.33% of our sample, which indicates that Mac computers are preferred over PCs among the sample of students studied. We then performed a hypothesis test to conclude whether Mac are preferred over PCs among the entire population. To test our hypotheses, we proceeded to a one-tailed test of comparison of a proportion against a predetermined value of 0.5 at the 10% significance level. The parameters are the following: the proportion of Mac users at HEC and the proportion of PC users at HEC. We chose to perform the test on the proportions of Mac, which is 55.33%. The null hypothesis is then Pmac is smaller or equal to 0.5, and the alternative hypothesis is Pmac is greater than 0.5. The test is valid since one of the conditions of validity is satisfied. The sample size of 188 students is greater than the minimum sample size required of 30. We then entered the appropriate variables in the Excel template and we obtained a p-value of 0.0716. We used the decision rule to conclude. Here, the p-value is smaller than the significance level. This results in the rejection of the null hypothesis. We can consequently conclude that at the 10% significance level, the data indicates that the proportion of Macs at HEC is greater than 50%, and therefore Mac computers are more popular among HEC students than PCs. In this case, we are exposed to a type 1 error, which would be to conclude that the proportion of Macs is greater than 50%, when in fact the proportion is smaller or equal to 50%. Since this is a type 1 error, it can be controlled. The maximum probability of type 1 error occurring is set at the significance level. Therefore, the probability of occurrence in this case is less than 10%. To conclude, we faced 3 major limitations that might have affected our study. First, we collected our data on different days, which increased the probability of counting the same individuals twice. The second limitation was not considering absences. They were excluded from our data collection and their preferences could have altered our results. Finally, the last limitation encountered was the sample size of our study. Our sample size could have been considered small since the size of the HEC population is very large and much larger than our sample. Thank you very much, and we hope this was helpful.